Welcome once again to How to Relate to Anyone. Here is Dr. Orv Owens.
Well, hello again. Today we're going to look at a subject that's kind of on the negative side, but we need to talk about negatives because they get in the way of productivity. Fear motivation is one of those things that literally destroys your desire to be creative. It destroys your energy so that 2 o'clock in the afternoon you say, tired and haven't done anything, I'm just worn out. And it's an energy drain because it's negative. Fear destroys from the inside out. Absolute fear creates death. It's called a heart attack. Many strokes and heart attacks are caused by intense fear emotions. People who are very, very negative tend to be sickly a lot because their emotions create a body chemistry that is affecting the immune system in a negative way, and they become susceptible to sickness. You know people that are sick all the time, and they moan and groan and talk more about their sicknesses and their ailments and their problems than they talk about positive things in their world. We cannot, as human beings, focus strictly on negatives because negatives then take over our life and literally control us from the inside out. Absolute fear creates a freezing and literally can create immediate death. There was two couples, young couples, in a car out on a date, and they were in a bad accident, and they found that they were all dead. They were all killed in this car accident. 3 of them were really banged up, but the fourth one, they couldn't figure out what was it that killed her, because she didn't seem to have any marks on her, any real bad bruises or cuts or whatever, but she passed away also. And so they called the ambulance people back in, and the ambulance people said, well, when we found these 2 couples, the boyfriend and the girlfriend in the back seat, his head had been severed, and his head was sitting in her lap. Can you imagine being knocked around and confused and so on, and when your eyes finally focus, your boyfriend's head is laying in your lap? She had an immediate heart attack, basically. She did not die from the accident. She died from a heart attack caused from the intensity of seeing her beheaded boyfriend's head in her lap. Well, that's kind of a drastic story to start this program off. But I would tell you, there are fears that keep you from closing sales. There are fears that keep you from being a strong leader as a manager. There are fears that would cause you to run from responsibility. And for sure you don't want authority, because with authority comes responsibility. Fear is a destructive force. You say, well, you got to have some fear or else you'll jump off cliffs. Well, that's just common sense, I think. But we're born with a certain amount of fear of loud noises and falling and some of those things. We don't have to create those. They're there already. What we have to do is create the positive, and that is, what do I do in a given situation where I have responsibility? Because as soon as responsibility is given to you for anything, and I don't care if you are my age or a 20-year-old, I don't care if you're the president of the company or a new employee, you're going to have fears. And how you deal with fear will determine how productive you'll be. Productivity is always based upon conquering the fears that are debilitating and cause us to run from responsibility, or at least ignore responsibility. And until somebody assumes responsibility in any project, nothing's going to happen. Responsibility is the is the fuel, basically, of an acceptance of responsibility is the fuel that motivates people to achieve. And fear is a destroyer of that motivation. Fear can literally freeze us. And so we want to deal with that. And my definition of fear, and it's a little bit unique, I made it up. Fear is an emotional response to a belief of loss. We think we're going to be taken advantage of, we think we're going to lose, we think it's not working out, I'm going to look bad. Anytime I have a fear of loss of face, loss of things, loss of health, fear takes over and our body chemistry changes and our creativity changes. And now instead of creating solutions in most cases, we start creating walls, creating defense mechanisms, creating reasons for failure. Most people who try something in error and then quit have a good reason why they quit. I mean, if you were me in my situation, you'd understand. You would have quit also. It was impossible to do that. You just couldn't make it happen. And every day in your life, there are areas of responsibility that come your way, and you either assume that responsibility and love it and throw yourself into it and use your creativity to be highly productive, or you allow fear motivations to cause you to back off. And in many cases, not assume that responsibility, and because you do not assume the responsibility, nothing is accomplished. And now, in many cases, the opportunity is gone, might never appear again. So many people have said, if I had only, you might have done that. I've heard it from hundreds of people over the years. If I'd only taken advantage, if I'd only invested, why didn't you? Fear. Fear. What if it fails? What if it doesn't happen? What if my investment is lost? What if I take on that responsibility and can't handle it? What if? And the what ifs of life are all caused by fear motivations, an emotional response to a belief of loss or looking bad or failure. And we don't want to be pegged as a failure. So the smallest element of thought is a decision. Every thought is a decision. There's no such thing as neutral. When people say, I'm going to think about it, that's a decision. They haven't made a decision about what they're thinking about, but they made a decision to think about it. You understand how that works? So procrastination is a decision in itself, but every thought is a decision. I like it, I don't like it. It's great or it's terrible. Who messed this up? Or, wow, that's really nice. We make decisions every moment of every day. From the time you wake up in the morning till the time you wake up in the morning, you're making decisions. We are decision-making mechanism in our brain that makes decisions. And the decisions determine your destiny. Decisions determine what you will achieve. Determines whether you will throw your heart over the bar, so to speak, and make things happen. It's all based upon decision making, and it's an ongoing thing, ongoing decision. We don't make a decision, we make a series of decisions in every decision. It builds up, and as you're going along, you're still making decisions. Sometimes it's corrective decisions, sometimes it's total change in direction decisions. Smallest element of thought is a decision, and those decisions accumulate and determine our destiny. You have achieved in your life that which you have taken responsibility for by making right decisions. And productivity brings happiness, brings wealth or success, builds good solid relationships. Productivity is what we're looking for in life in every area of our life. I've done a lot of counseling, both personal counseling and marriage counseling, and in most cases, breakdown in relationships are caused or started basically in a breakdown in a personal relationship within oneself, where I start having doubts and I start wondering why and what if, and those fear motivations, as they multiply, and they don't just sit still, they don't lie dormant. They're a cancerous type thought process that permeate and build momentum, and pretty soon we got a wall being built out of fear motivations. What if, and then what if of that, and you can build it to such a big deal that you run and hide. There's a whole lot of people hiding in our world. Responsibility carries with it a lot of fear motivations. It tends to cause us, what if I fail? What if I don't quite cut it? The highly successful person conquers that fear. The person who never reaches their personal goals are the people who do not conquer the fear, because it becomes a debilitating force in their life and causes them to hold back. And when you hold back, you never achieve much of anything. One of these days never gets here. When times are right and things are right, then I'm going to, never gets here. And all of a sudden you find yourself my age and you haven't done all those things you wanted to do. I've done some things that I really am excited about, and I've done some things I really regret. But in all cases, it's called plunging. It's just take the plunge, get out there. You can't learn to swim until you get wet. Just one of the rules. My mom said, don't go near the water until you learn to swim. And we had a little trouble figuring that one out. My brother, who's 2 years younger than me, we tried to figure out, how do you learn to swim if you don't get near the water? Come on, Mom. Mom was afraid of water. She was afraid of swimming. She just never learned to swim. And as a result, she kept warning us, don't go near the water. You might drown. It doesn't have to be very deep, and you can drown even in shallow water. So the closest to swimming we came to as youngsters was running through the sprinkler. And we did a lot of that and pretend we were diving and everything else. And then, we'd lie on the bed and pretend we were kicking and swimming. Well, my brother and I went to our cousin's home, 100 miles away from home, and it was up in the area where there was some creeks with some good deep holes, and our cousin said, let's go swimming. And my brother Dave and I said, well, we don't know how to swim. Well, it's easy. It's just simple. You hold your breath and just paddle away. And that day we learned to swim. I've been swimming ever since. Conquering that fear. My mom created a whole lot of fear in us about drowning rather than the fun of swimming. What do you look at in your life? Do you look at possibly drowning, or do you look at possibly having fun swimming? Because if you focus on the swimming side, you'll be highly productive and highly successful, because you'll do what it takes to get there. And that's what we did. You get in the creek. We learned to swim in Salmon Creek, and there's some deep holes, and we could swim across. And we found just holding our breath and pushing off, we could float clear across the creek. And then if we paddled, we could get there faster. And then if we kept paddling, we could pull our head up and take another breath. We learned to swim in one day by just plunging in. Our cousin convinced us we could do that. Self-doubts come from little failures, and we don't want big failures. When I allow little things, little mistakes I make, to dictate whether I'm going to take on more responsibility, I'm allowing the fear of failure to hold me back from achieving. Everything you've achieved in your life, you had to take some responsibility and you had to take some risk. There's risk in everything we do. Getting out of bed in the morning, there's risk. Eating some breakfasts are a risk in themselves. I don't know what kind of cook you have in your home, but if I have to cook for myself, there's risk in that, that's for sure. My wife's a great cook, and so I don't have to worry about that. But we take risks every day in so many areas, and risk-taking builds confidence, and confidence builds competence. And we become highly productive and highly successful and achievers by taking that first step, that risk. If we identify with mistakes, and by identifying the mistake, I'm not very good at that, never was very good at that, I've always been weak in that area, then we never succeed in those areas of our life because we have identified with mistakes we've made. Luckily, Thomas Edison didn't identify with his mistakes, or we wouldn't have electric lights. Anything you achieve, you're going to make some mistakes along the way. There's going to be errors. It's called the learning curve. And we have to plunge in, and we have to take the risk of maybe making some mistakes. Well, negative decisions hold us back from plunging or taking on that responsibility of creating new abilities, or turning actually natural abilities into capabilities. The measurement of your success is how many of your natural abilities you've turned into capabilities. Average American uses about 1/20th of our natural abilities, 1/60th of our brain cells. Here's natural ability. We're all running right about here. And those who are really highly successful double that, and that's about it. We have a lot of room for growth. And that's why we're learning new things every day. Technology is growing so fast, it's just hard to keep up with it. And it's because we have tremendous natural abilities, but we have to turn those natural abilities into capabilities, or they're non-productive. The concern for looking bad, the concern for a failure, making mistakes, are things that hold us back from taking the risk, taking the plunge, taking that first step towards creativity. Fear motivation says, what if? What if I try and fail? Then everybody will know I'm a failure. Well, everybody fails at stuff. Why do you think you could be any different than that? And the biggest failure in the world is failing to try. Because if you fail to try, you'll never succeed. You'll never reach the goal. You'll never get there. So we program ourselves for failure by focusing on what might happen negatively, as opposed to what can happen positively. It's interesting, when you start focusing on what can possibly happen, it's called creativity. And creativity brings on productivity. What might fail, what might fall apart, what might not happen is also creative thinking, but it's in a negative way. So, to control fear motivations, we have to make positive choices. Choosing every day, thoughts that are going to cause us to grow, cause us to develop, take some risks, but develop natural abilities into capabilities, and the end result is success or productivity or personal growth. It was Nike that says, just do it. And sometimes you have to just do it and clean up the mess later. Decisions determine your destiny. You decide, make a decision to take the risk. You'll learn from the activity. If you fail to take that risk, you'll never learn those lessons and you'll never grow. In our next lesson, we're going to be looking at love motivation. It's the opposite of fear motivation. Every decision is either love motivated or fear motivated. We're going to look at love motivation and how to control our thought processes so we're constantly in a creative, positive frame of mind rather than allowing fear motivations to be a debilitating force and hold us back from achieving our own personal goals. Look forward to meeting you in our next lesson.